Hello and welcome. My name is George Schlackeck. I am
the one and only.
Today I'd like to tell you about my experience with two different kinds of bicycle seats that I use. On the one hand, there's the Brooks B17. It is an unpadded natural leather saddle. Quite expensive if you're on a budget. You can find one in the $150 range Canadian, possibly a bit lower if you get lucky, and that's just for a basic one. I'm lucky enough to have two of those seats. One is on my touring bike and it is way beyond break-in. The other is on my road bike and it too is broken in, but to a much lesser degree. The seat I'm going to compare them to is a Kebyy Spider. I purchased it on Amazon about a year ago, and at first it seemed like I wasn't going to get it ever, because it did not arrive within the promised period. The seller claims that this is a carbon fiber seat. However, I have my doubts about how much of this is actually carbon fiber. It really seems to be plastic, as this pattern appears to be painted on. This seat, as you can probably tell, is also unpadded. The idea is that due to its construction, it can flex enough to adapt to your shape as you're riding and thereby applying pressure to it. Now, I'd like to give you a bit of background information on why I ended up with those saddles. In the first 3 months of 2013, I was going for a bicycle tour across Central America. I rode from Cancun to Panama, the long way, crossing from the Caribbean to the Pacific and back again, zigzag across the continent. I had no odometer, but estimate that the total ride was around 4,000 kilometers. I did this on a cheap saddle that seemed great riding in Edmonton for commuting. I think it was the kind of saddle that you get when you buy a bike at Walmart for $100. By the time I was in Guatemala, my butt had raw spots on it where the skin had just worn right through. I was wearing regular shorts and briefs underwear, so I wasn't really prepared for this long tour in that regard. I dealt with the discomfort by shifting my seating positions to avoid touching the sore spots and sometimes just standing on the pedals. Occasionally, my skin would heal enough to allow for normal riding, but the entire trip was a real challenge because of this lousy seat. I found out the hardest possible way that a good bicycle seat is important and that I couldn't get around one. Cheap as I am, after returning from that tour, I tried several used seats that I could get my hands on for cheap. None of them felt right. The next big bicycle tour I was planning was for the summer of 2017, Canada's 150th anniversary. My wife Barbara was smarter than I was, and she bought me this Brooks B17 for my 54th birthday in October of 2016. She knew it was the right seat because I had researched it to death and read about it for months, but had been reluctant to get it. There were mostly good reviews, but some were complaining about long break-in periods and how this seat just wasn't right for them. Well, when I first installed the Brooks on my touring bike, it became clear on the very first ride that this was the right choice. The seat was comfortable right out of the box. Before the B17, I had actually considered selling my Norco touring bike at some point because the other bike I have had always seemed more comfortable due to its slightly lower geometry. That all changed with the B17. In the summer of 2017, I rode almost 9,500 kilometers across our country, coast to coast. Not once did I get a blister on my butt, and once again, I was riding in street clothes. The second B17 I have is brown. It was a donation at our local bike shop, and I had the opportunity to snatch it up for only $45. This was a used item that somebody tried probably for a few rides and decided it wasn't right for them. It was right for me, and now I have it on my road bike. That road bike I'm talking about is the one I built last year from a discarded frame and parts I managed to gather from all over the place. When I first built that bike, I had the Kebyy Spider on it that I had ordered on Amazon just for that project. The Brooks was on my other BRC road bike, and I had broken it in. The plan was to put it on the new bike eventually and sell the other road bike. But for the first couple of months, I rode the newly built road bike with that Kebyy Spider. The idea with that seat, similar to the Brooks, is that it is flexible enough to adapt to the shape of your butt. Same idea, very different look and feel, and most certainly at the opposite ends of the price spectrum. The Brooks costs about $150 or more online. I'll leave a link in the description, but I want you to know that I'm not sponsored by Brooks nor the Kebyy Spider, which sells for $23.20 Canadian on Amazon. And the one I have says currently not available, but there are a ton of similar ones that are. Of course, I was very skeptical about this supposedly carbon fiber seat. I honestly believe that it's just plastic, made to look like carbon fiber by printing this pattern on it. But I don't know for sure. Maybe there are a couple of carbon fibers somewhere in this thing. Who knows? But the important point is, of course, how comfortable is this thing? I made a video in the summer where I put the Spider through a 130-kilometer test ride on a Friday. You can find this video and hear me praise the seat. Yes, it was definitely okay for a longer ride, but I wasn't too sure if that would be the case for an extended tour over several days and weeks. The thing definitely flexes as advertised, but it's not really comparable with the Brooks in terms of comfort. Plastic of the kind this seat is made of doesn't adapt to any shape permanently. What makes it work are the many holes that allow it to flex under pressure, thereby providing some limited cushioning effect, similar to a spring. In that way, it's probably more flexible than the Brooks. It is also durable and waterproof. All good things. But in order for it to be durable, it can only have limited flexibility, and that makes it feel very firm, and not necessarily in the right places. The Brooks actually is kind of firm too. When I first put mine on the bike, you could knock on it and make it sound like a piece of solid wood. Once broken in though, the Brooks adapts to your individual shape. The Brooks website actually states, made by hand, shaped by you. And that pretty much sums it up. You probably have an old pair of shoes that should have been thrown out long ago, but is extremely comfortable because it has adapted to the shape of your feet over time, or a pair of worn out jeans. That's what happens to the Brooks. It becomes 100% you, and that makes it the most comfortable seat possible. There may be some exceptions, and I'll get to those. The point is, the longer you ride your Brooks, the more comfortable it will feel. The Spider, on the other hand, has no way of achieving that. It's plastic, and plastic doesn't change shape. It either stays the same or it breaks eventually. But it doesn't have the ability to adapt to someone's individual shape. It will never be more comfortable than on day one. This certainly makes it sound worse than it is. So don't get me wrong, I found the Spider comfortable enough, even after that 130-kilometer ride. It is very nicely shaped, to a kind of one-size-fits-all, most common butt shape. Since it's flexible, it will actually work quite well, probably for a variety of different shapes and sizes. Here's the thing. I found it to be way more comfortable on the long ride than most padded seats I have tried over the years, and there have been a few. It tells me that the concept is sound. They're onto something with this. Padding might work on shorter rides, but the longer you go, the more you are stuck with the sometimes unforgiving piece of plastic underneath. For a padded seat, it seems, therefore, that you'd have to find one that fits you just perfectly. Where the Spyder seat is more adaptable due to its flexible structure. I already mentioned price. If you're on a budget and need a seat that you can ride in relative comfort, this one's a bargain. It works, is durable, waterproof, and dirt cheap. While it looks a bit like a torture board, it offers pretty decent comfort. Another advantage, at least for some that care, it only weighs 204 grams, and that's with steel rails. I'm sure there might be an even lighter version for a bit more money. Just do your own research. Now let's jump ahead a few months. I live in Edmonton, Alberta. Our winters are very cold. Plastic does get brittle and stiff in the cold, right? Well, I decided to put my Kebyy Spider on the winter bike and find out. Even if it was going to be a bit stiffer, my rides are usually shorter in the winter and I'd be okay. Worst case scenario, I'd have to invest in something else. But it seemed worth the risk. Now I can honestly say that the seat has not given me any trouble with soreness on my butt, and I've ridden it exclusively since early November. I ride on some very rough trails and I have recently done a 200-kilometer ride over 2 days using that seat. On really rough trails and bumpy roads, I feel how hard the seat is, but overall it has served me well and it shall remain on my winter bike. While I would not go on a cross-Canada trip with it, I'm grateful for having found such an inexpensive solution. You really can't go wrong with it unless perhaps you're very heavy. I've seen one review on Amazon for a similar seat that complained about the rails breaking. I'd expect the plastic to break before the rails, but haven't run into either scenario. The Brooks is the winner in the comfort department. At least after break-in, around 1,000 kilometers or sooner, if not right out of the box. The Brooks is expensive, and not to forget, it's not waterproof and needs some maintenance. Brooks recommends treating it with proof hide. You can also use Snow Seal, which is a beeswax-based leather treatment intended to weatherproof your boots. It is a bit cheaper than proof hide and probably very similar in composition. You get more for your money. I paid about $8 for this in 2016 and still have plenty left. The more your seat breaks in, the less you have to do that to it. Do it at the beginning, then a couple of months after, and then probably 6 months after that, or when it seems dried out. The other maintenance issue is that bolt that can stretch the leather when it becomes too saggy. I had to do this one time because the leather was starting to touch the rails. If you do this too often, it will probably wreck your seat prematurely. The Brooks weighs 460 grams, so more than double the weight of the Spyder. I mentioned there may be an exception when it comes to comfort. On the Brooks website, you will find a reference to the angled riding position. The B17 standard is designed for a 60-degree riding position, which is higher than you'd sit on a road bike when racing. You may have noticed that my seat looks angled upwards by quite a lot, and it is. I'm not telling you that you should do the same, but it definitely works for my touring bike. I would suggest to start out with the seat in a level position and go from there. Many experts will tell you not to tilt the seat backwards, but it really all depends on where your handlebars are in relation to your seat height and what feels right for you. A lot of experts' recommendations are for road racers, and you don't necessarily have to worry about them if you like to sit more upright.
So let's summarize this.
On a scale of 1 to 10, the Brooks gets a solid 10 in the comfort department. The Kebyy Spider gets, I'd say a 7. The Brooks is not waterproof. That takes a few points away when it comes to durability. Make sure you protect it from rain and maintain it as instructed, and it is easily an 8. The Kebyy Spider hasn't had any issues, so I have to give it a 10. If weight is a concern, the Brooks is heavy at 460 grams. Oh no! So it loses a few points here. On my unscientific scale of 1 to 10, I'll give it an 8. Weight's not a big concern for me. I know that for some this could be a deal breaker. Even the titanium version, according to Amazon, weighs 408 grams. It seems hardly worth the extra $120 or so. At 204 grams, the Spider gets a perfect 10, at least from my perspective. When we have to look at price, to me, over $150 makes me think twice about ordering another Brooks for my next bike. I have to give the Brooks a 5, even if it's worth every penny, because it hurts every time when the price of your build seems to double just by putting the seat on. The Spider, a perfect 10, just over 20 bucks. So there you have it. You could say that there are a lot of points in favor of the Spider. It's a seat you can get without too much worry, and it will likely be okay. However, if touring is what you're gonna do, there's one aspect that becomes priority number 1, and that's comfort. No other seat will be as comfortable as a broken-in Brooks. For touring, it's worth the extra money every time. I hope this video helps you make a decision and that you've enjoyed watching. I also hope you'll join me for my next video this weekend on how I got back into bicycle touring after my life got disrupted in a big way after my first tour. It would be awesome to have you as a subscriber. It's just a click of a button. No commitments, super easy. So thank you. And what's in it for you? Well, a lot of great videos. Check these out.